Hi, everyone, and welcome to Brian's Horror Corner. I'm your host, Brian, and welcome to day 22 of my 31 horror movies in October Halloween series. So, today we'll be taking a look at a recent anthology movie. It's a kind of a horror comedy, and that is Scare Package, which is a Shudder original, with the tagline, "If you don't know the rules, you'll never make it out alive." So, yeah, Scare Package is a very fun horror anthology, horror comedy anthology actually. So let's just go ahead and get into the setup, the premise, the stories, and a little bit of the cast, and then I'll get into my thoughts and review, which will be spoiler free. So, Scare Package is a 2020 American anthology horror film created by Aaron Kuntz and Cameron Burns. It features a series of horror shorts written and directed by many different people. Aaron Kuntz, Courtney Andajar, Hilary Andajar, Anthony Cousins, Emily Hagens, Chris McEnroy, Chris Mc looks like an L. Chris McEnroy, I'll go with it. Noah Segan and Baron Vaughn. The film is presented as an anthology of short horror films built into a frame narrative, which acts as its own horror film. The frame narrative focuses on Chad Buckley, a horror aficionado who runs a struggling video store. He takes on a new hire, much to the chagrin of, of, of an obnoxious regular customer named Sam, who has been trying to persuade Chad to hire him for years. The shorts are films that are either described to other characters or viewed as one of the video rentals offered within the store. So yeah, that's just kind of the main setup. We got a whole bunch of stories. It's a little bit different because the framing story and the narrative also is a separate horror story. So you basically have what's called Rad Chad's Horror Emporium, which is the not the very beginning of the movie, but the beginning of the framing story. You got Horror Hypothesis, which is the last story that takes off from the wraparound story, the frame narrative. Then you also have the cold opening, which opens the movie. One Time in the Woods, Mister, Mister, Girls' Night Out of Body, The Night He Came Back Again, Part 4, The Final Kill. So Much to Do. Um, yeah, so that's basically all. So there's seven total stories, and that's including the framing story, horror story. So it's a little different in that regard. As far as the cast goes, there's way too many to list everybody. So I'm just gonna list the ones from Rad Chad's Horror Emporium, kind of the main framing story characters, and then Horror Hypothesis, the last story that takes off from the main framing story. So we have Jeremy King as Chad, we have Han Tran as Han, and we have Byron Brown as Sam. That's Rad Chad's Horror Emporium cast. And then for Horror Hypothesis, besides having Jeremy King as Chad, we have Zoe Graham as Jesse, Chase Williamson as Pete, Josephine McAdam as Kelly, and Justin Maina as Brandon. So yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of go through each of the separate stories or the shorts, if you will, and kind of give you a little synopsis about what they're about. And then after I do that, then I'll go in and give you my thoughts and my review overall to the movie. So obviously, Rad Chad's Horror Emporium is the film opens with the cold open first, after which Mike, one of the people who's in the cold open, is shown describing the short as a horror movie pitched to Chad, who picked him up as a hitchhiker. So that's just like the start of the framing story that ties in. But first we get the cold opening. That's how the movie opens. Mike Myers is a stock horror movie background character tasked with facilitating the horrible circumstances other unsuspecting horror characters find themselves in. He fiddles with a loose road sign arrow indicating the location of the insane asylum. The arrow spins in the wrong direction, causing a group of unsuspecting young people on their way to a camp to instead drive to an insane asylum. So that's the gist of the cold opening. And again, then it goes into Rad Chat's Horror Emporium, which is this guy Mike from the cold open riding with Chad, who Chad picked up as a hitchhiker, and Mike is explaining this short known as the cold open to Chad, um, and trying to pitch it to him. Basically, it's kind of confusing to explain, but It goes cold opening, then Rad Chad's Horror Emporium, and then the first cutaway short after we get the main framing story started is called One Time in the Woods. This is a trip where Mark, Don, and Brenda are camping in the woods. Mark steps into some mysterious green goo that thinks is bug guts. A crazed man shows up warning them to leave and that he's going to kill them. So then we have Mr. or Mister. It's actually an acronym. A husband sits alone at a bar chatting with a bartender who creeps the husband out. The husband goes into the bathroom and notices a flyer advertising an organization called Mister, which stands for Men in Serious Turmoil Establishing Rights. Then we have Girls' Night Out is the next short. Ray browses the aisle of convenience stores. She's being stalked by an unseen person who breathes heavily. She notices a lollipop in the shape of a human skull that says not for sale. She steals the lollipop and leaves the store with Allie. So that's that one. Then next we have The Night He Came Back Again, part four, The Final Kill. Daisy and Greg are in bed kissing. Someone watches them from the adjacent closet or a jar closet. Suddenly the window is smashed and a mankind killer climbs through the window. Before the killer can stab Daisy, a group of her friends spring from the closet and subdue the killer with stun batons. Then we have So Much to Do. An unseen person drives wearing black leather gloves. A man is tied with rope and locked in the trunk of a car. The car parks and two mysterious men in all black drag. The ti- Wait a minute. The car parks and two mysterious men in all black drag tie the man to a gravesite. The tied man wakes up and pleads that he has much to do. And then finally, we get Rad Chad's Horror Emporium, which is the main story, ties into Horror Hypothesis. Um, But you know what? I did not print the notes for that one, but I can kind of tell you what it's about. There's a lot to this movie to unpack. I have 2 pages of notes, but basically, Horror Hypothesis is kind of like Cabin in the Woods. If you've seen that movie, it's you have Chad, and then he wakes up in this room. Well, I don't want to give too much away, but basically, it's like a lot of the shorts. It has all the horror tropes of this maniacal killer, basically. Um, who is after these people in a room. Shoot, I really can't explain this one without ruining. Just watch the movie, okay? That's about all. This is a really hard movie to review now that I'm starting to do it. But it's a really fun movie to watch. That Scare Package, a Shudder original from 2020. It came out on Shudder, but 2019, I believe it was actually made and brought to the film festival that it came to. Um, But yeah, that last part, Horror Hypothesis, you'll have to look it up yourself because I really don't want to spoil it for you. But it's in essence kind of a slasher. Um, it has all the tropes of a slasher movie in essence, and it has some really cool appearances by a certain Shutter character, Shutter mainstay, I guess you would say, Joe Bob Briggs. I'll just say that much. But it's I really can't figure out how to explain it. Yeah, I'm gonna end up giving too much away. Basically, you have all the cliches. You have the final girls, you have the jock, you have the slut, you have everything, and then of course Chad is sort of the Randy of Scream, if you will, and they're all trying to escape from this place they were trapped in to get away from this killer, and things happen, and it's just a lot of fun. You really got to watch it. So now I'm going to go ahead and get into my actual pros and cons and review of this movie. Um, this movie is just fantastic. It's such a fun and entertaining watch. It's a great horror anthology that works for the most part. And what really works about it is the horror. Or I'm sorry. Well, the horror works too, but the humor. I got the wrong H word there. The humor is what really lands for me in this movie. And there's a lot of horror comedy movies that just don't always work. There's a couple that do, Zombieland being the most notable for me. But this is a horror anthology, comedy horror anthology that I really love. Um, Most of the humor landed for me, especially from the character of Chad, Rad Chad, the video owner. played by Jeremy King. He just embodies everything about the horror nerd perfectly, and I found a lot of humor in all the horror tropes and cliches as well that they used. They're so spot on. There's a lot of meta-ness to it. It's just so enjoyable and so funny. You have a lot of over the top blood and gore that fits in really well with the movie. It was actually humorous because of the content, the great effects, all practical. I love the framing wraparound story with the video store, the characters, the humor, and how the shorts are presented from that wraparound. So it's very unique and different. It isn't just somebody sitting in their house watching a tape that they were given, or just we've had all kinds of framing stories, but I really like this one. It really works well, and even though video stores are kind of a thing of the past now, unfortunately, somebody like me can really relate to them, and I didn't run into anybody like Chad, and when I went to them, but I do know those people existed. It's just a really unique and creative concept. Um, it was cool that the movie had seven different directors and different takes on the horror genre. All the shorts and overall story were pretty well directed, I thought. I really enjoyed the self awareness and meta aspects of the entire movie. It's just a very fun movie. You really have to watch it. As you saw from earlier, it's hard to explain because there's a lot of different things going on with a cold open to a framing story that turns into a story with other stories uh, in between there, and so it's hard to explain, but it's definitely easy to watch. Maybe that's the best way to say it. Um, so getting into the individual shorts of it, definitely a couple of my favorite are definitely there's I have three favorites. One Time in the Woods. This movie is the one where they're like camping in the woods, and they step in the green goo, and then the guy shows up and says he needs help. He's gonna kill him. This might be the best one out of all. And it was a great way to open, at least after the framing story. Not open. The cold open is the open, but this is a great short, especially with the practical effects they use. There's so much over the top gore and blood. It's just so fun, so tropey, so cliched. It's just such a great time. I love the you end up getting like a snot monster, a melting monster in this one, and it just every time they cut away and then cut back to them, it's awesome stuff, awesome stuff. So that's One Time in the Woods. Girls, no, let's see. The Night He Came Back Again, Part Four, The Final Kill. You gotta love this one just because it's again so tropey when it comes to slashers like Jason and Michael Myers, especially. Um, Basically, this group of young people are trying to do in this guy to keep showing up on the Fourth of July every year, and so they're trying to do all these things to him, different ways of killing him, and he keeps coming back. It's so enjoyable. Again, the blood and the gore are really over the top. Some of the kills that you see in it are really fun and over the top. Yeah, that's just a great one. And then finally, the horror hypothesis one, the one I had a hard time really explaining, the last one. Really enjoyed that one as well, especially with Rad Chad in there and the cameos we get from Joe Bob Briggs, and it's just so awesome. Um, so yeah, those are my favorite of the shorts. There's good cinematography throughout the movie, really solid and great camera work, and the settings as well. It's a really good looking movie. Um, like I said, my favorite gag in the movie is definitely the goo monster from that One Time in the Woods. The cold open is also a pretty solid way to start the movie, I think, because it really gives the viewer a good idea of what they can expect in this movie, what it's sort of all about in terms of the tone and the meta-ness of it, and the tropiness of it. Really effective sequence to grab the audience's attention. And I also love the very ending of Horror Hypothesis, which is the end of the movie, because it ends up tying back to the beginning of the movie, to the cold opening and the character that we get in that. So it really makes for a full circle, really solid anthology. So yeah, those are all my pros. I just can't say enough. This is just such a fun, easy, entertaining watch. A couple of cons that I have, a couple of the shorts kind of felt flat for me and didn't work out for me quite as well. Notably, Girls' Night Out, which is the one about the lollipop with the human skull on it. The human skull lollipop, basically, and also So Much to Do. I just didn't find those overall that fun or interesting. They're just kind of blah. They're also not very they're not very tied to the rest of the movie or very cohesive. It doesn't feel like it kind of feels like they were made aside and then they plucked them into this movie. It just doesn't have the same tone and atmosphere that the rest of the movie has. Which brings me to my next sort of con. The overall pacing of the movie isn't great. It felt like the movie was just about 10 or 15 minutes longer than it needed to be, which, if they would have cut out those two segments, you still would have had five nice horror short stories. And I think it would have made it more effective. It would have been closer to that 90-minute mark. As it is, it's about 108 minutes, which is a little more like an hour 45, hour 50, close to something like that. So, and then my final con is the orange skulls that we end up seeing in Girls' Night Out from the lollipop. I'm not going to give too much away, but they're pretty disappointing. The orange skulls that these gals end up having on their faces. They're clearly masks and they're not very convincing. Pretty lazy effects there, I thought, for a movie that has a lot of great practical effects. That was one area that they must have just went to Spencer's or something and thought they'd pick up some masks for $1.99. So overall, those are pretty nitpicky cons. You've got to check this movie out. This was one of the few movies that I watched on Shudder, I think back in like March or April of this year, 2021. And I immediately went when it was over. I went to Amazon and I ordered it on DVD because it might still be on Shutter for all I know. I'm sure it probably is, but it ain't going to be on there forever. Plus, there's something about having the physical media to be able to watch from anywhere, which again I know I can do with Shutter as well. But hey, I wanted to buy it, get off my case. No, but this is just a fantastic movie for what it is. You could get into the acting. The acting's not the greatest, but for the movie like this, it doesn't need to be. I'm not even going to call that a con because the performances are uneven throughout. It's kind of some unknowns, but they work well enough for this kind of movie because we're so used to having sort of cut out cliche, not great acting characters and in certain horror movies like slashers. So it's fitting that that's the same case here. But I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 as far as the rating goes. I think it's a great horror anthology. It's an even better horror comedy anthology. I think the best I've seen in terms of horror comedy anthologies. I'm not sure how many else are out there. I think Chillerama's out there. I haven't seen that, but I think that might be along the same lines as far as a horror comedy anthology goes. I mean, but let me know in the comments if you guys have seen this, if you have any questions about it. I highly recommend watching it, but comment down below what you think of Scare Package, the Shutter original from 2020. Give me your pros and cons. Please like this video, hit the little notification bell below so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, and subscribe to my overall channel so you don't miss any of my horror content, including the rest of my 31 horror movies in October. It's hard to believe we've only got 8 days left. We're getting close to the big day of October here. But yeah, and I also have some great horror stuff coming up in November. We're taking a look at a classic television anthology series. So make sure you subscribe for that. So thank you for watching this video. Have a great day. Stay scared. Bye.